the Fed. What are your thoughts on inflation in 2022 and the possibility of rate hikes?
Every year we have these things we talk about all year that end up being kind of pointless, and inflation's one of them. Inflation is the thing I care about the least. I'm worried about the least because I grew up in a period of time at the end of my childhood was the highest inflation in American history. So when I was a kid in the early 70s, when I was a little kid, was the highest period of inflation in American history. And it was because of the Iranian oil embargo back then. And oil prices shot through the roof. America had no other place to get oil. And our economy got devastated by inflation and high oil prices. And we had this thing called stagflation where the economy didn't grow and we had inflation. And the 70s was the worst markets. 69 to 79 or 70 to 80 was one of the worst markets between that and 2000 to 2010 because of inflation. But in the early 80s, Volcker and the Fed, they figured out they just had to raise rates through the roof. And, if you talk to some really old people, they'll still talk about when you could buy a government bond that paid 15%. It seems crazy today that a government bond paid 19%, but if you were buying bonds back in 83, 84, some of which, were coming to maturity just 5 years ago, we're still paying, 30-year bond paying, 15%. So that killed inflation. And from the 80s to the present, technology has been killing inflation. So technology moves faster than prices or goods. So the innovation that we've seen moves much faster than physical goods or prices. So we're seeing it right now with oil prices. Okay. There's nothing better for Tesla than $90 a barrel oil, because the higher oil prices go, the more everybody looks at alternatives. And if you look at a 10-year return of oil, you've made 0%. So you invested in oil 10 years ago, you haven't made any money. You invested in oil 4 or 5 years ago, you haven't made any money. Only people who made money invested in oil at the bottom of the pandemic when the economy was done. And now the oil people have stopped producing new oil because they need to force prices up. But the mistake they're making by doing this is incentivizing technology to come up with the solution, because high oil prices are the only reason we have inflation right now. It's the only reason. If you look at where inflation's coming from, it's energy and transportation costs. So shipping and it's oil. So in some ways, there's nothing better for innovation than $90, $100 a barrel oil. So the Saudi Arabians and the Russians can collect their checks today, but what they're ultimately doing is sowing the demise of their main source of income, because between the utilities and the way our energy system works in the United States now, there's never been a better time to go solar, buy a battery, and get an EV. Okay, there's 100 reasons. And one of the biggest is saving money. And you can save a substantial amount of money by doing this, going EV. And so inflation isn't my concern. My concern is the opposite, is that we have created a almost socialistic type economy at the same time as our population has aged dramatically. And these baby boomers are still working, even though they're on their last leg. You got 75 and 85-year-olds like my dad still working. I cannot get him to retire. He moves much slower than he did 30 years ago at the prime of his career, when he was less than my age, okay, or older than me, actually. So he's still working. And you look at the CEOs, or you look at the president of the United States. The president of the United States is so old, he can barely talk. It's embarrassing. And I voted for Biden, and, I'm I don't know what I am anymore. I'm mostly a Democrat. I'm an independent now. I've relinquished my Democrat title because the Democrats have gotten so bad at what they do. But you look at the president of the United States fighting with a racist, white supremacist Trump, who's 80 years old too. And I got two 80-year-olds fighting for presidency. And there couldn't be a worse thing for this country. So when you think about the aging of our country and the demographics around industrialized economies, you think about the socialistic bent that our country has taken, where now lots of people just expect to be taken care of. The biggest issue we have is deflation. And it has been for years and years, and it will continue in the future once we get past this weird pandemic up and down that we're doing. We shut everything down. We open everything up. Everybody goes out and parties and buys shit, and the ports get clogged and the prices go up, and labor, all of this is a one-time thing. This is not going to happen again. Okay. And so as we kind of come out of this post-pandemic period, we've got a good growth vibe going here. As good a growth vibe that I've seen. So that's super bullish. And rates are going to go higher to offset this. But what we're going to find is rates don't have to go up too much to kill inflation. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, oh, Fed's going to be raising 8 times, 10 times. I go, the Fed's going to raise like 4 times and the market will have enough. The economy will roll over. And that's why the market got hit so badly in January. Because the market knows that if the Fed's too aggressive, this all ends. And they're not going to do this. They're not going to be too aggressive and kill this recovery in an election year. They're just not going to do this. And that's where I think there's upside in the markets if you're starting today, because the markets are discounting, 5 to 6 rate hikes this year, a very aggressive Fed with running off the balance sheet. It's like the hawkish Fed is priced in. And if that hawkish Fed comes, you're right, stocks will not do well. But I don't think that's what's going to end up happening, because we're going to see inflation come down pretty quickly as we get towards the middle of the year. And then I think once we see inflation come down, the howling will stop about it. We won't have to talk about it anymore. And we'll start talking about the real issue in America, which is getting people back to work. There's lots of demand for labor, and there's lots of people telling me they still don't want to work. And we created this sort of false expectation that the government will just give you money, unemployment will never end, and you can't get evicted from your house. So don't worry, you don't have to do anything. The problem is that's not real, and that's ended. And many people are having a hard time accepting that. And that's going to be the challenge that we face moving forward, is getting people back in the workforce and getting people back to work and getting our society productive again, because there's a lot of unproductivity still in the market. I think they're saying still 3 or 4 million people haven't rejoined the workforce yet. So inflation is not my concern. My concern is socialism and aging workforce. We've got a healthcare system that can't take care of our people. We have way bigger problems than inflation. So inflation's good right now. It's higher wages, higher costs. It's about time we have some of this working. It's a byproduct of a 6% economy. We go to a 4% economy this year. That's phenomenal. My entire career, we've been working around a 2% economy. So Warren Buffett said this: if we go from a 2% economy average to a 3% economy average over the next 30 years, so much wealth will be created in this country, I can't even tell you.